Hello, and welcome to this month's KFSA's Risk Management webinar. This month's webinar is about how to conduct non-classroom training as it pertains to bin entry. Bin entry is used as an example in this case as to how to conduct non-classroom training. You'll see by going through this brief presentation about how simple it is to go out there with your employees and cover the specifics and what they need to know to do their job or task safely. First things first, you should grab your employees, a bin entry permit, and just head on out to the elevator. You're going to simply walk them through the process of filling out the permit, and everything on that permit is just a checklist to ensure that they've done everything they need to do to enter that bin or storage structure safely. You'll start by asking them where the permits are located and how to obtain one and who needs to sign off on them or who can sign off on them. And then you'll simply roll through the bin entry permit, starting with step 1. Lockout Tagout. This is by far the most important step in any safety process. It's no different for bin entry. Lockout Tagout for the grain bin means more than just the way to fill the bin. It's also the way to unload the bin or empty the bin. The idea is that you lock out any means of moving the grain. If grain can flow or move on its own, it can be dangerous to your employees. If it has to be physically moved with shovels or vacs or scrapers or any other means, it poses less of a threat to our employees. We also have to ensure that our employees are locking out any conveying equipment, such as floor augers, sweep augers, or any other sort of drag that an employee could step in and become entangled in that type of equipment. Remember, even in slope bottom bins, grain can flow due to gravity, and so slide gates must also be locked out if that grain can still flow on its own. The next step to cover with your employees is the air monitor and its proper use. Are you using single gas monitors or a multi-gas monitor? And then go over the differences in how these are operated and what each monitor is telling you. You may need the owner's manual to read and briefly answer questions that may come up from your employees to do this. You're going to talk about your bin ventilation and whether or not, when you need to check whether or not that bin has been ventilated to be safe, whether or not SCBA gear is provided, or if you even need it. Same thing with combustible gases, or if there is a hazardous atmosphere, then what are you going to do? What are the employees' procedures when they find grain to be out of condition that causes a shift in atmosphere? And then we're going to take a minute to talk about a body harness and when it's necessary. Same thing with the Lifeline, bosun's chair, and tripod. Do we really need these objects or personal protective equipment in all cases of bin entry? Maybe your policy says your employees will wear a body harness with a lifeline at all times. If you're wearing a lifeline, it does zero good to wear the lifeline to the side of a bin unless it's for positioning. If it's just present because you need one, it's serving no purpose and can actually cause you more harm than good. If you're going to wear a lifeline because of a potential engulfment hazard in grain, it needs to be attached from above. There are several types of structures where this is simple to do, and there are several where it's not. These are things that you need to be discussing with your employees as you go through this process, talking about your body harness, lifeline, or bosun's chair. Next on the permit, you're simply going to talk about what kind of lighting you have. Is it adequate? Or do you need to provide more light than just opening the doors and allowing sunlight to shine through? Perhaps you need a drop light or a flashlight or a spotlight. If so, they all need to be approved for the environment, meaning they need to be Class 2, Group G. On your bin entry permit, it will typically ask if the entrant has been trained on safe bin entry, if the standby has been trained on bin entry, and is the entry supervisor adequate and trained in what they need to be looking at. Those questions all need to be talked about right now in your non-classroom training. They don't need to come up when it's time to fill out the permit. This should be a simple check the box that yes, I do have adequate personnel to enter this bin, or nope, I don't have the person available right now that knows what they're doing for me to safely enter this structure. Next on the permit, it talks about your standby, your observer, or your attendant, whichever you choose to call them, and it talks about what kind of communication method is established. You should write that method down. You should not just check that, yes, we do have communication, but what means of communication is that? Is that radios? Should you buy radios if you don't have them? Should you talk about any other means of communication that may be available, or that your employees may have a better idea of what is necessary when they're entering a bin, and for the standby and the entrant to have a better means of communication between each other? We touched base on this earlier, but you need to be talking with your employees about the floor augers and whether or not you need a grate. If that auger is not locked out and it is in operation, a grate must be installed. Even if the auger is not in operation and it is locked out, it's still a good idea to install a grate over that so that an employee does not step into the hole and roll or potentially break an ankle or foot. Most importantly, we need to be talking about the condition of the grain. More times than not, when there is an incident inside of a grain bin, it's because grain is in cliffed, bridged, or poor condition. This can happen for many reasons. Mostly, it's about moisture or heat inside of the bin to cause the grain to be out of condition. You need to talk to your employees about what it looks like when grain is out of condition and what their procedures are when they see that grain is out of condition. Should it be that they just stop immediately and come and grab you? Should it be that they do not enter the structure no matter what? These all need to be decided and need to be talked about amongst the group during your non-classroom training session that you're going to conduct. Last but not least, you have to take a moment to talk to your bin entry supervisors or the people that can sign off on the bin entry permit to validate that everything has been done safely. They have to know that they must go out and physically check and look at every step in the process to verify that all of the employees did all of the things they said on that entry permit and that they fully understand what it is that they're to do. Remember, verify, verify, verify is the most important thing for this entry supervisor to understand. As you can see, conducting non-classroom training is not near as intimidating as one thinks, nor does it take up near as much time, and typically tends to be more effective than any other style of training because you are showing and walking employees through exactly what's required, what's necessary, and how to properly or safely conduct that job. Your only choice now is whether or not you will act upon this session about conducting non-classroom training, and remember that bin entry is just one example of how to conduct non-classroom training. You can do it with any other type of equipment or any other specialized procedure that you may need at your facility, whether that's loading anhydrous ammonia loading anhydrous ammonia nurse tanks, operating a skid steer, payloader, or whatever that may be. Simply walk the employee through it and then write down just brief notes about what you covered. Thank you for attending this month's webinar over conducting non-classroom training for grain bin entry. Remember, if you have any questions in regards to safety or compliance, please don't hesitate to contact your Ag Service or KFSA risk management person immediately.